Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell. Kelly felt as if a viscous, sticky, impenetrable fog had enveloped her entire body, and huge weights were tied to her arms and legs. The woman could not know whether she was in this world or the next. Her mind was filled with fragments of the most recent events, as if they were still images in a movie. The last thing she remembered was a huge car flying toward her. She desperately pressed the brakes. The pedal fell to the floor, but the speed did not get rid of. Then a turn into a ditch, a terrible bump on the ground and darkness. It was as if Kelly could see herself from the side of her hand. Her legs didn't move at all. Her body felt as if it were a stranger. Her eyelids did not want to get up, no matter how hard she tried. Suddenly she heard, through her headache, someone's footsteps and the creaking of a door. Did someone come in? A voice conversation began. She immediately remembered and realized it was her husband. Jacob was talking to a man. She rejoiced. Thank God, since Jacob is here, it means that I am alive. Honey, I'm okay. She tried to shout it out, but she couldn't get a sound out of her. Eventually, she gave up trying. She humbled herself and listened to the conversation. Doctor, how is she? I am so worried. My wife will soon come to her senses because it's been 2 weeks and she's not better. She is between life and death. Jacob replied, I will not hide it, but the situation is very difficult. The chances of your wife regaining consciousness and recovering are very slim. You see, there is a severe spinal injury and head trauma. Right now, we are artificially maintaining the body's functions in order to achieve a stable condition for further surgeries. Jacob then cautiously began to probe the ground. Means the chances are slim. It's clear how long she can stay in this condition. My understanding is that without these machines, she will die immediately. Then what's the point of torturing the person? We should just decide to turn them off. After all, in fact, she's not even alive anymore. The doctor was taken aback. What are you talking about? You have to hope and believe. Sometimes miracles do happen. I know of cases where patients have come out of comas after a year or even 5 years. I've seen all sorts of things while under the care of doctors. Believe me, all the more her body is young and should cope with the disease. Believe me, everything can change at any minute, and it's silly to bury her before it's time. How old? How many years? The man burst out in astonishment. You know, but my wife's hospital stay will cost a lot. If I stop paying for her treatment, what will happen to her? What kind of what? It would be very unfortunate. Your wife won't get the drugs she needs, only the ones that are free. I'm afraid she won't stand a chance. The man couldn't hide his smirk, so I'll definitely have a couple more days' pay. And after that, you can transfer me to free treatment. I won't be able to pay, you know. Times are tough for everyone, including me. If you can get her off life support right now, I'd appreciate it. And for that kind of work, of course, I'll pay you a generous $100,000. That should be enough for you. The surgeon was speechless. So you're asking me to kill your wife? Are you out of your mind? I'd go to jail. What would I need your money for then? Jacob started talking fast. What are you really saying? Don't be so quick to say no. Think it over. It's a lot of money. And I hear you're having some financial difficulties. And it's all the more reason to do it without any witnesses. I shouldn't be the one to tell you. The doctor was silent. Then he added that I have to think about it. Maybe I will. Now go. Visiting time is over. Go away. Jacob, as if nothing had happened, leaned down to kiss his wife on the cheek and said until tomorrow, my love. The surgeon, who had seen a lot in his years of work, was stunned by such blasphemy and cynicism. He felt madly sorry for this unfortunate patient, so young, so pretty, and such a fate. 1 minute her husband was offering to kill her, and the next minute he was kissing her. What a bastard. Suddenly, the life support system the woman was hooked up to beeped. The doctor ran to the patient and could not believe his eyes. She was looking at him fully consciously and crying. Tears streamed down her cheeks. She trembled with all her body and tried to raise her hand to wipe them away. It came with great difficulty. The surgeon began to feel and count her pulse, shining a flashlight, her pupils, checking her reflexes, and happily he said, "Are you awake? I congratulate you. It's truly a miracle in your recent stats. Yesterday they were almost 0. It's unbelievable. Why are you crying? Are you in pain? If so, I'll tell the nurse to give you a shot for the pain." The woman weakly replied, "I heard everything." How could he? I loved him so much. "What about you? How could you do this? What are you going to do to me?" You agreed. And now all of a sudden, it doesn't go according to plan. The hopeless patient suddenly came to her senses. The surgeon hurried to explain himself. "You've got it all wrong. What kind of a murderer am I? I took the Hippocratic Oath. I said it on purpose to make him believe me. I decided to mess with his head. Otherwise he'll start looking for another way to get rid of you. And this way he'll think that everything is already arranged. I want to expose this scoundrel. But how can I help you?" "I don't know. I feel so sorry for you. You are still very weak, and you need a long treatment after such injuries." The woman said, "Don't tell my husband that I have come to my senses. Let him think I'm still in a coma. Put the recorder under my blanket when he comes in. I'll press the record button. I've got to have proof of his terrible plan." The surgeon answered perfectly. "Then the next time your spouse comes back to the room, we'll continue the conversation. And it must be written down. Your task is not to move or give yourself away." The patient nodded in agreement. "Yes? And if it's no secret, please tell me, how did you manage to choose such an awful man as a husband? How did you get into this terrible accident? If you don't want to answer, I understand. Then rest." Kelly sighed and quietly began to speak. "I was born in a small town. My mother worked as a sales clerk and my father as a janitor in our neighborhood. There were often quarrels in the house. Father was a drinker. Mother and I often slept over at friends' houses, being afraid of his drunken misdeeds. As you understand, we lived poorly. At school, I was taunted by angry classmates who shouted at me, 'Why should you study, Kelly, if you were going to sweep the yards anyway? Like your father.' So no matter how hard I tried, it was no use. It was so frustrating, and I tried to spite them all. I studied my books. I got good grades. I was sent to competitions and awarded certificates. Teachers praised me, but my peers were even more angry with me because of it. I didn't care about them. Even as a child, I had this dream that I would become rich and prove to everyone that I was worth something, and that I'd shut all those who hurt me behind my back. So I graduated with an honors degree on my own, without connections or connections. Of course, it was hard to survive in the capital without money. What little my father earned, he immediately drank away, and my mother could give me almost nothing. It got to the point where a loaf of bread and a bottle of milk was my ration for a couple of days. To survive, I started working as a waitress in a cafe. I wanted to sleep, day and night. After graduation, I was lucky enough that my economics professor at Mason helped me get a job as an intern at Monolith. At first, it was hard too. Nobody really explained anything. I had to do everything myself. Over time, they noticed my diligence and zeal. I became a senior manager and then the general director, and honestly earned a comfortable apartment, a brand new car, without denying yourself anything. But don't think about it. I am not one of those rich business ladies who look down on everyone around her. I always remember that I come from a poor family, and I am not ashamed of it. On the contrary, I am proud of the fact that I achieved everything on my own. Of course, given such a rhythm of work, I had absolutely no time for my personal life. I didn't sleep. I worked like a squirrel in a wheel. You would come home, completely tired, and you would fall down. I didn't have the energy to sleep for anything else, although I really wanted to meet my true love. Just like that, to fall in love once and for life. I met Jacob completely by chance. I was with my coworkers at a corporate party at a restaurant, and he was from another company. My feelings flashed instantly. Between us, not just a sparkle, a real fire broke out. He completely captivated me. Such a sensitive, gallant, well-read, and distinguished gentleman. He introduced himself as a designer and artist. We met briefly. Passions were boiling mad. We immediately decided to get married. We had a fancy wedding. At my expense, of course, for all the time we lived together. And it is not nearly 2 years my husband sold only 3 paintings, and with the design that's something he did not get on very well. But I never pressured him. My earnings were more than enough to live on. My mother-in-law, on the other hand, it didn't work out right away. I felt a kind of coldness and dislike coming from her. You know, my husband and I never even fought. He was always so attentive, sensitive, and caring that I could not rejoice in how lucky I was. He would give me a massage and make me a Turkish coffee and always hugged me and loved me. I still can't believe what I heard today. Maybe he's just had a stroke of insanity and will come to his senses. Let's observe. Well, I don't believe my dear and loving Jacob would do such a thing. And the woman cried again. The surgeon couldn't stand it and took her by the hand. Come on, Kelly, you can't be nervous. You're all resting and gaining strength. Goodbye. I'll bring the tape recorder to you in the morning, just like we talked about. James didn't tell anyone that the patient was awake and continued to take notes in her chart. As before, the next day, Jacob came to his wife in the room, looked at the thin, pale face with closed eyes, sighed, and said, "Well, dear, you do not look good." Then his phone rang, and the man turned on the video call. It was an unfamiliar woman. "Hi, honey. How long are you going to keep checking on your wife? Maybe it's time to do something about it. Everything is under control. Here's almost agreed with the doctor. He will disconnect her from the machine. That's it. We'll have all the riches in our pockets. Finally got rid of that one. Annoying fool. How many times can we serve her and pretend to be passionate about her? I'm sick and tired of her. Unattractive. Thin as a board. She's a log in bed. She's a tough one, isn't she? I thought I'd cut the brakes. She's going to die. But no, she survived. Everybody says she's dead, but she didn't die." The woman laughed. "I always said she was a witch. Tell me, how did such a beggar with a drunkard father and a janitor manage to make so much money? So don't wait too long and hurry up. I can't wait for you and me to get the money and fly to Las Vegas." She heard it, and the hair on her head stood on end. She wanted to jump up and slap the bastard in the face and ask him, looking straight in the eyes, why he was so with her and what evil she had done to him. But the voice of the woman on the phone sounded so damn familiar. Who was this woman? With a titanic effort, she held on, biting her lip literally to the blood and remaining motionless. When her husband came out, Kelly burst into tears, crying so bitterly and sickly she had never felt so bad. A couple of minutes later, James entered the room. Seeing the girl in this condition, he immediately rushed to her. "Jesus, what's the matter with you? That scoundrel has done something. I met him in the doorway. I couldn't even get him to talk to me. Apparently he was in a hurry to go somewhere." Kelly didn't say anything, just handed him a tape recorder. When the surgeon listened to the tape, he got sick. He was horrified and said to Kelly, "This is no joke. Is your husband a murderer? This is the second time he wants to kill you. I'm afraid for you, and I can't keep you safe in this room. I have a suggestion. My grandmother Lisa is a healer who lives in a remote village 500 kilometers from here. I can take you there in my company car. She will help you to get back on your feet, gain strength to recover. Now I'll go to the police and report this scoundrel. You're in danger. What would it take for him to break into your room and do something irreparable? You're so weak you can't fight back. He must be punished. What a scoundrel the earth is like." Kelly cried and grabbed the doctor's hands. "James, why are you helping me? I am a total stranger to you. I mean, after what you've heard, you're in danger too. I don't even know who I've lived with for 2 years, and I don't know what I can expect from Jacob. I don't think I knew him at all. The doctor stroked her skinny shoulder. Kelly, I just want to help you humanly, but I won't deny it. I like you. That doesn't bind you to anything. I'm just stating a fact. Kelly's heart started beating stronger, and she even got a little blush on her haggard, skinny face. She was suddenly desperate to live, to get out of the clutches of her illness, and to show Jacob her place. And James's words were very pleasing to her. James told the nurses to keep an eye on the sick woman and went to the police station, which was 2 blocks from the hospital. At the entrance, he ran into a man in a police uniform. My goodness, James. What in the world? What happened to you? Unfortunately, people only come here for unpleasant reasons. The doctor looked at the man carefully, but could not recognize him. Excuse me, but I'm a policeman, smiled. No wonder. How long it's been? 5 years. You saved my son from the other side of the world. He was choking on a toy and couldn't breathe. Do you remember? Of course I remember the yellow plastic wheel. That's right. And your son's name is a rare Charles. That's right, James. So what's going on? Let's go into my office and talk. The coroner's office. James told me everything. Let me listen to the tape of the conversation with the mystery woman. The investigator took what he heard very seriously. It all makes sense, James. There are only 2 options here, either round-the-clock security or to hide Kelly for the duration of operational activities. Of course, the second option is better, so I will organize a surveillance of this Jacob. We need to get a lead on the woman. There's a conspiracy here. The article will be harder on both of them. Oh, and keep recording his conversations. We'll get enough evidence that no lawyer can break a conviction. Do you have any ideas? When Jacob walked into his wife's room a couple of days later, as usual, he was stunned. There was no one there. He wondered if it had really happened. She had died herself. The man rushed rashly to find the doctor and rushed into the resident's room without knocking. Soon there was a shout of indignation from James. His wife was gone. Where is she? Why is the ward empty? Where had she gone? He shrugged his shoulders himself. I do not understand. Yesterday she started to come to her senses and stirred a little. Came in today for the shift, and she was gone. She ran away. I had the whole staff on their ears. Nobody saw anything. I don't know how that happened. Jacob almost screamed. Now what? Where do we look for her? Where had she gone? The doctor rushed to reassure the man. Why would you want to look for her? You seem to want a different result. Without proper treatment, your wife has a week to live, tops, if not less. So your question resolved itself. You didn't even need my help. Wait, but you and I had a deal. You unplug Kelly from all these machines, and for that job, I'm giving you a lot of money. Well, if that's the way it works out, then you're out of money. And so we parted ways. Meanwhile, the doctor's tape recorder recorded the whole conversation. Actually, Kelly wasn't running away. James asked an acquaintance to take the patient to the village, warning his grandmother in advance. She understood. Without further ado, she promised to get the woman back on her feet. When Kelly was brought to the village, her grandmother Lisa was already waiting there in full armor. She dashingly commanded, "So David, help, take the sick woman to the baths. I prepared everything there. And how will I end up with you? You help me carry her inside, and you can go to the bathhouse." It was hot. Kelly was laid face down on the chamber, and Lisa began to put a birch broom on her lower back and whispering the ailment. "Come out. We cure." Kelly felt pain for the first time since her illness, and so far not in her legs and back. The sensations kept increasing. She was both painful and joyful at the same time. Would she ever be able to get back on her feet? After all, just yesterday, she felt absolutely nothing below her waist. After the bath, her grandmother massaged her legs and back with some sharp-smelling oils, wrapped her in a sheet with a blanket. She also brought her a fragrant tea of oregano and honey. She began to make recommendations. Well, that's all. That's enough for today. My name is Lisa. James, my grandson told me to put you on your feet. You must be precious to him. So don't mind me, sweetheart. I'll be tough. Let's start the exercises. You're gonna do exactly as I say. This is gonna hurt like hell. There's nothing you can do at first, so put a stick in your mouth and be patient. No painkillers. You have to go through the pain. Then your body will fight through it. Got it. What's your name? Belle. The woman shook her head. My name is Kelly. Thank you, Lisa. I'll do everything. What do you say? I believe you. James tells me you've been on your feet for a long time. The old lady was embarrassed to hear you say that, and she said you were advertising for me too. I'm helping everybody as much as I can. Well, all my dear, now to sleep forces, be collected we with you still long with illness to fight. From that day on, Lisa took on Kelly in earnest. She didn't let up. She gave her potions and massages and made her work through the pain. The woman cried, clenching her teeth, biting her hands, but she forced herself to raise her legs even a millimeter higher than yesterday. Every step like that. It is a hellish, unbearable pain, penetrating her whole body as if by an electric current. In the afternoon, Lisa would take Kelly out in the garden in the wheelchair and ask for help to pick currants or cut up apples to dry. So in the cares and heart-to-heart talks, the time flew by quickly and unnoticed. The atmosphere in the village of Kelly liked it very much. There are such responsive, kind, open people. Not as in Metropolis, just an indifferent. Walking past you, the crowd concerned only about their lives. Here people helped each other in everything and were more than neighbors, almost relatives. In the evenings, they would gather on the bench, chatting heartily, drinking tea, sharing all their sorrows and joys. If someone was ill, they rushed from every house to see who had what. And immediately they called for Lisa. If there was a leak in the house, everyone in the house would fix it. It was so wild for Kelly. After all, she was used to everyone in town being on their own. No one cared about anyone else. Noble people like James are extremely rare. A few days later, a doctor came to visit her grandmother. To be honest, he really wanted to see Kelly, to know how she was this skinny, small, defenseless, like a bird. As soon as she was admitted to the hospital after the accident, he spent a long time with her, personally performed a complex operation. Then he was very nervous when she fell into a coma, and then he was terribly glad that she had come to her. And in all that time, Kelly had become dear and close to him, as she looked at him gratefully with huge brown eyes with long and beautiful lashes. He was willing to do anything for her. James had been long divorced for over 5 years with his ex-wife he had met while still a student. She was a bright and provocative brunette. She first asked him to dance at the disco, then dashingly took him under the arm and firmly said, "Well, let's go home to see me off. Fiancé. Or didn't you like her?" And so their romance spun on Miranda's initiative. The bride was from a rich family. She was used to live in a large family, and she could not deny herself anything. If vacation, it was only on the Maldives. If things, then only branded goods. After the wedding, Miranda thought that their relations would be so dramatic, and James would dedicate all his time only to her, but she completely disregarded the specifics of his work. The man was constantly busy with the heavy shift of duty. Part-time work came in, exhausted and tired, and instead of silence and rest, he received a portion of a woman's hysterics. Miranda became more and more distant and spent time with friends at parties. About children did not even want to hear, always resented. What kids? I imagine I'll be a fat woman with stretch marks and cellulite. The baby would be sick, screaming, no peace. Let's live a little for ourselves. And so we lived for 10 years, like strangers. One day, far from a beautiful day, James, coming home from work, found a note. "Sorry, I'm leaving you. Don't look for me. We were always strangers. Goodbye." Strangely enough, James wasn't upset at all. On the contrary, he sighed with some relief. At least he would no longer hear reproaches and hysterics in his address. It had been 5 years since the divorce. In all that time, James had never met the one who lived his job. worried about every patient. It was only when he saw Kelly that something stirred in his heart. And with each passing day, love sprouts began to sprout inside. So today, when he entered the house and saw Kelly concentrating on making pies, he involuntarily admired her. The woman hastened, her cheeks became ruddy and her eyes bright. Gone frightening dark circles under her eyes. Granny dashingly wielded the stove and cooked the oven. When she saw her grandson, she spluttered her hands. "James' grandson has arrived. How glad I am, dear. Soon your favorite pies will be ready with your milk and cottage cheese." James waved his hand in greeting. "Hello, Granny. Are you on fire as always? 100 things to do at once. And Kelly is unrecognizable. It's only been 3 weeks, and you look so much prettier. I can't take my eyes off you." Woman. She got sick of all those compliments, and she was quick to brag about her accomplishments. "James, look what I can do already." Kelly took a deep breath of air, concentrated, and began to lift her leg up. Then the other. Then both at once. The doctor stunned. "Now that's progress. You guys are doing great." "Grandma, how did you do it?" All the drugs didn't help her. Lisa smirked. "Old tried and tested recipes, herbs, medicinal jars. Works wonders. It's not chemicals. I think soon he will run on his own feet." In the evening after a nourishing dinner, Lisa said, "Oh, I'm tired today. You grandson, today instead of me take care of the patient. Massage, rubbing, and exercises. And tomorrow I'll go myself, I'll rest." And grandmother went to her room on her favorite bed. James covered the table with a sheet and gently took the woman there, stripped her down to the waist, and began to massage her lower back. At first gently and gently. Then more assertive and stronger. The touch of his hands was just something unimaginable happened to Kelly. She was just dying of desire. She had never felt such a strong sensation before. She felt hot and cold. Thoughts swirled in my head. "Give me a kiss, please. I can feel you want it too." Suddenly James, as if he'd heard her pleading, leaned over and whispered in her ear, "Does that hurt?" If anything, scream. Kelly, burning with shame and lust, she couldn't stand it and whispered, "Kissing me." There was no need to tell James twice. He literally sank into the woman with a fervent, passionate kiss. From there, they both just lost their minds. They were overwhelmed by their feelings and didn't come to their senses until morning. The whole night, James covered every inch of her body with kisses and strokes. He whispered words of love, called her a goddess. Kelly melted and dissolved completely in the ocean of passion without a trace. She was at the peak of bliss, completely forgetting about her illness. In the morning, the naked woman tried to get dressed and get into the stroller. Sitting on the edge of the bed, she held onto the backrest and tried to get up at the same time. Unbelievable. But she succeeded for a second. From the joy of surprise, she screamed, "James, I'm standing," and immediately she fell to the floor. Like a wreck, the frightened doctor woke up in a flash and ran to her. He picked up the woman light as a mouse in his arms and carefully placed her in the stroller, began to lament over her. "Well, what are you doing, silly? Many are still weak, muscles are not strong. And if it is broken, all our efforts in vain. Promise me you won't scare me like that again. I'm so afraid for you. You are the dearest thing I have." He kissed her hands and blew on her battered knee, and Kelly was just melting with such tender feelings. Lisa, meanwhile, was fussing about in the kitchen. She heard everything and just smiled softly into her handkerchief. She saw how her grandson had changed. Finally, he spread his wings and looked like an eagle again. She prayed that it was all right. At least everything would work out. And then, at last, the grandchildren will come to me in my old age. The doctor said goodbye and went to the city to work, while Kelly stayed in the village and continued to work hard. After a month, she was walking on her own, leaning on a stick. The country life was very much to Kelly's liking. She often found herself thinking that she didn't want to go back to the city, to be plunged back into its frantic rhythm, and become part of that huge machine. especially since she had a little friend here, a boy from the neighborhood, David. He lived not far from Lisa with his absent-minded mother. She drank heavily and walked around completely forgetting that she had a son. David was out walking day and night. No one ever called him home. No one ever tried to fondle him or clothe him warmly like other children. The woman often fed him, took him in her arms and talked to him. He was like a spikelet to the sun, instinctively reaching for her, caressing her and cuddling her. Kelly felt so sorry for the boy. Some unknown feeling completely engulfed her. She was constantly worried about David. If she did not see the boy in the morning, she was not herself. The limit of her patience burst when she saw the huge bruise on his narrow arm. She decided no, this could not go on. She had to do something, or else this mother would ruin the baby. It was obvious that she didn't care about the baby at all. Kelly tried a couple of times to get her conscience right. The boy's mother tried to talk some sense into her. The shack was filthy and dark on the bare, sunken earthen floor with her skirt up. A woman was lying there snoring loudly. All the woman's charms were in full view, and there were traces of the raucous merrymaking of her drinking companions nearby. Kelly looked around in horror. There was trash and piles of empty liquor bottles everywhere. It was a nightmare environment for a small child to live in. He didn't even have a bed. There was just a dirty blanket piled up in the corner. The woman barely roused the drunkard by forcibly washing her with ice-cold water and started yelling at her, "Aren't you ashamed of yourselves? What are you doing? You are a mother. Your child is hungry and crying. Always finishing crumbs, and you drink so much. If this doesn't stop, I'll be forced to call the child welfare authorities, and they'll take your child away from you." It was not a sight for the faint of heart. The woman swiveled wildly with sleepy eyes, breathing the horrible stench. Her greasy tresses were sticking out in every direction. She was angry and shouted back, "Who are you? What right have you got to tell me what to do with my life? David's father's a real jerk. He came here and went to jail for theft. And I'm the only one who has to feed the sucker. With what money? That bastard is always yelling and begging for food. I'm fed up. Call wherever you want. They'll take him away. The hell with it. Less to worry about. Have you got a drink? Can't you see I'm sick?" Dazed Kelly shook her head. "No, I don't drink, and neither should you." Then the wretched mother took even more and shouted in a foul-mouthed voice, "Then she got out of somebody else's house, and David is mine. I do what I want with him." "I see. Get your own, then give out advice." Kelly backed away in horror and ran out of that awful shack. The boy was trying to take a bone from Sherrick the dog. Playing with him, he was so grimy, so /skinny, and pale. Kelly reached out to him and said firmly, "Come with me, David. I will feed you and bathe you. I'll love you. Come here." And the baby trustfully smiled and climbed into the arms of the woman. Lisa saw from afar how the new lodger could hardly walk, limping and carrying a scruffy baby in her arms. She wondered, "Why did you bring David here, my dear? You're not allowed to lift heavy things. You are still weak. You are just on your feet. He has a mother. Where is she? Is she at home?" "No." Kelly choked with indignation. "Lisa, is this mother at home? Is she asleep drunk? Naked ass upside down, dirt, dust, cockroaches everywhere." I tried to reason with her. What was it? She was screaming that she didn't want the baby. "Let me stay with you for a while. I'll heal a little more and get him adopted. The baby shouldn't have to live like this, starve, cry, and watch his mother do all sorts of bad things. My father used to drink a lot too, and then my mother and I would hide in the neighborhood. And we'd walk around with bruises. I know how bitter and hurtful it is. Well, won't you kick me out?" The old woman wept. "You've got a good heart, girl. Come in, of course. I'll warm some water with herbs. We'll bathe the lice, take out the kerosene. In the meantime, let's feed the baby. He must be hungry. Don't give him too much at once, or he'll twist. God forbid. Give him some of your porridge to feed him warm. In the meantime, I'll give him a bed beside you in your room." Women for a long time bathed the baby. He happily splashed in the pillow, then poisoned lice swarming in the boy's head. And then he greedily ate the semolina and smiled with pleasure. The boy's clothes were so filthy that they simply had to be thrown away. He was wrapped in a soft blanket and put to bed. He fell asleep immediately, sweet asleep. Kelly and Lisa exhaled and sat down for tea. Grandmother asked how tired she was. "Have you changed your mind to adopt, then? It is not an easy thing. You do not forget that David has a father. He's still in jail. But it's true, no one has deprived him of the child. So you'll have to fight for David. You can't envy his parents." Kelly nodded stubbornly. "I'll fight it. I've got a crush on David. It breaks my heart to look at him. I'll just get my husband to come clean and get a divorce. I have a good salary, so David won't need anything. I'll raise him with the dignity that he and that drunken mother will see. What a future for him to wander and vagabond." Meanwhile, James called Jacob with some sad news. "I have some bad news for you. Supposedly your wife, from the description, was found dead in a village near the city. Unfortunately, she is buried in the cemetery as Jane Doe. Condolences." Jacob was jubilant and could hardly hide his emotions. What sorrow! The poor thing had suffered. That must have been her fate. What can you do? I'll order a wake at a restaurant. Goodbye. Jacob couldn't hide his joy and dialed the woman's number on his way out. "Darling, it's happening. Kelly seems to have been found dead in some village. It's all ours now. We should at least have a wake for her as a distraction." "No, Jacob, don't get excited just yet. First, you have to make sure it's definitely your wife and not somebody else's. You don't inherit until 6 months later. And before that, the police will be looking for her and asking uncomfortable questions. You have to prepare yourself and talk to a lawyer." Jacob was immediately discouraged. What a mess. He couldn't die, as he was supposed to do right away in the car. Another month passed. James decided to visit Kelly and Grandma again. He missed them both very much. Besides, it was time to bring the scoundrel hubby out in the open. The doctor dreamed that Kelly would divorce the scoundrel. They would get married and live as a family. James was greatly surprised to find a pretty little boy of 3 years old in the house. Kelly fed him soup and said, "Come on, David, spoon for the elephant, spoon for the teddy bear, spoon for the yellow chicken. Good boy, you will grow up big and strong." The baby, however, ate everything with great pleasure. When he saw James, he happily ran in and clapped his hands. Uncle had come. Kelly rejoiced and threw herself on the man's neck. "Hello, sweetheart. How nice of you to come. I want you to meet David. I want to adopt him. I'll tell you all about it later. He's cute, isn't he? And he's so smart, isn't he? How did you get here? What news? Maybe I could come back to life. I just really want to get this whole sordid story over with and start my life over with. Do you mind?" In the meantime, the investigator collected hard evidence and found out who the husband was talking to on the phone in the room. Molly worked at the same monolith firm where Kelly was the general manager. She worked as a simple manager. She wasn't particularly bright, but she had plenty of ambition. Molly envied Kelly to the point of shivers and darkening of the eyes. She hated her so much that she would go over her head to take her place. The plan hatched for a long time. She had no trouble falling in love with Kelly's husband. She easily incited him to the crime, expecting that when she and Jacob will sign, get rid of him. In the evening, the investigator went to Kelly's apartment, rang the doorbell, and was opened by a quite content with life. "Jacob, good evening." "You, Jacob, hello." "Yes. What can I do for you?" The policeman showed his papers and answered, "I am serving you with a summons to clarify certain things in connection with the disappearance of your wife. Come tomorrow at 9 to Krasnoyarskaya 17. The officer on duty will show you to my office. By the way, why didn't you report it to the police? Or it didn't upset you at all? How should I look at it? You don't look like a grief-stricken husband, do you?" Jacob got cold feet, but didn't show it. It's been so long. I've come to terms with everything. All right, I'll be there. I have nothing to hide. I loved Kelly very much. The next day, Jacob, fully confident of his impunity, came with a summons to the investigator. He greeted him dryly, pointed to his desk, and after reading out his rights and responsibilities, began. So, Jacob, we conducted an additional inspection of your wife's car, in which she was driving at the time of the accident, and the examination showed that the braking system was intentionally damaged. And that's a felony and a criminal offense. So someone tried to kill your wife. What do you have to say about that? Jacob fidgeted in his chair, and his throat got hoarse. He replied, I have no idea. Little did I know, Kelly was the CEO of Monolith. Maybe there was a conflict with someone there. She and I were soulmates. We never even fought. And I could see the falsity in the eye. The investigator grinned and said, What are you talking about? That's unfortunate. I have completely different information, and I even have evidence. The investigator carefully laid out on the table a stack of photographs in which Jacob was captured in the arms of Molly. Seeing the pictures in front of him, Kelly's husband's nerves began to give out, and he asked him what was against the law here. Am I not allowed to talk to women? You're bluffing. And you have no evidence against me and cannot be. Then the investigator, with a satisfied look, pressed the button on the recorder. And then Jacob's voice came on, where he was telling Molly that he had damaged the brake hose in the car. Jacob got all cold and sweaty and almost screamed. This is a provocation. Maybe a simple montage. I'm literate, and I know that an audio recording is not admissible as evidence in court. I didn't say that. Or have you decided to hang all the dogs on me? An experienced investigator understands. This is the moment of truth. It's now or never. It doesn't matter. We found your fingerprints where the brake system was damaged. And there's a witness who says you offered him money to get rid of his wife. So you're looking at a lot of jail time for attempted murder, no matter how you look at it. And you are lucky that your wife is alive and well. Wouldn't you have got out of jail if you hadn't? Jacob continued to stand his ground. You're lying. All of you. My fingerprints couldn't have been there. Kelly is dead. I know for a fact. And then, in the end, Kelly spectacularly appeared from the next room. She was bright and fresh. She was still limping, though. She smiled sweetly. Well, hello, dear. Did not expect to see me alive and well. Poor you, do not worry. Well, you don't have a face on you at all. So I was unconscious, but I heard all your conversations with your mistress and the attempt to bribe the surgeon, and my plans to kill you. I only have one question for you. Why? Why do you hate me so much that you are ready to get rid of me by any means? You've basically been living off me, even though I've never yelled a word at you. Jacob blushed and twisted in anger. What did you think? You grew up as a beggar, and suddenly such a lot of money fell on your head. Why everything to you? Nothing for me. If you must know, I didn't love you for a second. I was sick of you a long time ago. If it hadn't been for that lousy doctor who chickened out, I'd have made it. You're a tough one, aren't you? That's when James walked in. There's the lousy doctor himself. I swore a Hippocratic oath, and I couldn't go along with you, not even for the money. But you, my dear fellow, will finally be punished as you deserve. Especially since I have carefully recorded all your speeches, so you can't get away with it. You should have seen Jacob's face. At that moment, it expressed 1,000 emotions at once: anger, rage, hatred, surprise, and disappointment. He was cursing Kelly. What the hell was wrong with her? What a bitch, and he got away with it. Survived her. How could she? That goose is good too. Don't worry, she promised him more money. And if he sings to her tune, how much will I get? I can't survive there. I can't go there. I'll die in prison. Kelly, help me out. Why don't you say something? And then all of a sudden, Jacob started begging. I'll tell you everything. I'll cooperate with the investigation. It's all Molly's fault. She encouraged me to kill my wife, and split the inheritance. I didn't want her to go to jail. It was Molly's idea. She made me do it. Give me a chance to get better. And I hope I get probation for aiding and abetting the investigation. Help me, Kelly." She was disgusted by this pathetic picture. Jacob, once so beloved and dear, was crying and smearing tears on his face just to get out and save his own skin. The woman was terrified. How could I love that monster, the immoral, vile type of lowlife? She immediately shifted her gaze to James. He smiled encouragingly at her. A wave of tenderness and warmth immediately swept through her. Jacob did not come out of the police station. He was taken away to a cell. Molly was picked up straight from work and brought to the police station. She immediately began to blame Jacob for everything. But she didn't. The investigation showed that it was she who had conceived this nightmarish plan. James was surprised to clarify that indeed his fingerprints were found during the inspection of the car. So why wasn't the criminal case opened immediately? I don't understand it. The investigator laughed, but we did not find anything. Not only that, but he had so masterfully damaged the hose that he could have got away with it. I was bluffing. I've been on the job a long time, and I can see right through people. I knew he was lying and getting cold feet, so I pushed a little harder. As you can see, it worked. The bastard swam right away and confessed to everything. All citizens, you're free. We'll put you on the stand to testify. Now, my dear Kelly, you have no one to fear. You can go back to your life." Kelly began to thank the investigator. "Thank you so much for believing me. Can you imagine what I went through when I heard that my husband, looking at me lying in the ICU, was hatching a plan to kill me out loud? That's probably why I came to my senses so quickly from shock and horror. And then the day before the accident, I had driven my car to the scene. Everything was fine. I can't believe this whole nightmare is over. Goodbye. And thank you very much." When James left the station, he asked, "What's next? What are your plans now?" Kelly sat down on the bench and breathed in the fresh air. "Well, first, I'm going to go to work, see how things are going without me. I'll probably resign and sell all the property. I want to stay in the village, to adopt a house to buy. I can open my own business, start my life with a clean slate. I can't breathe here after the village. My soul yearns to go there to the countryside. And also, if we're having this frank conversation, I want you to be a part of my family. No, I want you to be part of my family. How does that sound? James, you're freaking out. What a twist. You're the CEO of a thriving firm, and you're going to the middle of nowhere. I can't believe it. I've always loved our little village, too. I grew up there with my grandmother. Are you right? We could open a private surgical practice because there are no doctors around here. People would come. Now they go to the district center for 200 kilometers on bumps and bumps. Only this case is not easy. You need a license, and there's a lot more to pull off. And you would manage everything. You know how to organize everything with David. It's not that easy either. You'd have to go to the same investigator. He seems like a smart guy. Have him ask for information on the boy's father. Then we'll know how to proceed. And most importantly, I want you to know the very first minutes you were brought in, so small and helpless. You are forever in my heart. So divorce your scoundrel and marry me. I can't promise you a mountain of gold. Not only that, I'm a nerdy pedant and a bit of a snorer, but I'll do my best for you and David. For the first time in years, I have a reason for living, an incentive to live." They hugged and sat on the bench for a long time, discussing plans for their future happy lives. The next week, Kelly decided everything about her job. She didn't sell the apartment, so all the employees and neighbors she knew were shocked and kept saying the same thing. "Kelly, you thought well of it. Just leaving everything behind and going to the middle of nowhere like that. You'll be bored out of your mind in 6 months. What are you gonna do there? Meeting in the mud, digging in the garden." The woman just shrugs it off. "You don't understand anything. I've been to the very edge of life. And now I know for sure that life is short and so fragile that it should be spent on something really important. For a family of children, it is necessary to have time to be happy. And what are the people like in the countryside? And the nature and clean air. The soul sings. I have a son there, David, nothing. And people live there. I won't be lost. I'm not used to hardships. James was judged by everyone at work too. The supervisor yelled and ripped up the second application in a row. What's the big deal? James, my dear, I'm not letting you go anywhere. Who's going to operate? We don't have enough good surgeons as it is. You have talent. You're ruining it in this godforsaken place. So you decided to get married. And that's wonderful. So why leave? The doctor was just waving it off. No, don't even talk me into it. It's a fresh start. A woman you love, a son, a new job. When Kelly and James arrived in the village, they found a nice warm oak house. There was a real bathhouse in the yard, a gazebo with a beautiful railing and a canopy. We began to settle in quietly. We got to work together. Everyone washed, painted, rode, and cleaned. In the evening, Kelly suddenly got sick. She was thrown out right in the middle of the yard. David got scared and cried. A frightened James put her in the baby's car too and drove to Grandma's. Started talking confusedly. Grandma, I don't understand anything. What's wrong with Kelly? Her blood pressure and temperature are normal. She's throwing up all over the place. Maybe she sniffed the paint and she's allergic. What can we do to help? David was frightened too. Lisa patted her belly and wiggled her head. Like little kids, honestly. Pregnant, she would be twins by all accounts. She shouldn't have died. That's what made her sick. David, get a bunch of mint, molasses, and chamomile from the barn. We'll cure your mama. The little boy rushed expertly into the barn and really brought what he needed. He didn't sit with Grandma for nothing. While Kelly was in the capital taking care of things, learned a lot from the wise old lady. And James stood there like a statue with his mouth open. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. How pregnant, like twins. Wow. I've spent half my life alone without kids. I always dreamed of having a family. Now I'm about to be a father of 3. Who's gonna believe that? Lisa put a compressor of cool vinegar water on Kelly's forehead, gave her a decoction of herbs and told her off. That will not do, my dear. What are you thinking? They're going to kill my grandchildren. If you're in a position, don't lift anything heavy. About the children, David scared the hell out of me. Kelly rounded her eyes. What grandchildren are you talking about? I have no children except David. The witch doctor laughed. I've been a healer half my life. I know for a fact that you are pregnant with twins. So get ready to give birth in 8 months. The woman was in deep shock. She listened to herself and realized that lately she had been feeling a little nauseous and her lower abdomen was hurting. But that's not uncommon for women. And then such news. Lisa Kelly trusted her grandmother 100% after she had put her on her feet. James sat down beside her on the edge of the couch and took her favorite by the hand. He looked her tenderly in the eyes. Grandma told you about the twins too. I'm still in shock, but I wasn't scared. Don't think so. I'm very, very happy to be a father of many children soon. And David we will raise. Don't worry about it. He is not a stranger to us. I got used to him and loved him with all my heart. Kelly spoke hastily. So we have time to sign David, to adopt, to buy everything for the baby's nursery, to set up a separate room. And there's work to be done. Wow, how much to do. How am I going to be in charge? With a stroller. James interrupted her and kissed her tenderly. Hush, my general. You must be in charge. A whole bunch of kids. That is your main task now. I'll take care of the rest. Do you trust me? Kelly smiled happily and serenely. What kind of happiness was that? Just to be a woman and hand over the reins to a strong man. Of course I do. You saved my life. Well, look, you decided so yourself. I'm going to walk a lot with David will eat sauerkraut, and I'm going to be fat and lazy. Let's see what you say then. James kissed her on the cheek and said, I'll love you anyway, just as long as you and the babies are around. Kelly felt so warm and good at heart at those words. James spoke sincerely. From the heart, Jacob and Molly got a decent sentence for attempted murder. The ex-husband hasn't had it easy. He contracted a serious illness when he got out. He was unrecognizable, a toothless old machinist walking around with tattoos and a terrible cough. Even though he was only 35 years old, he began to drink heavily and cursed himself every day for his deeds. 6 months later, he was gone. After another heavy drinking binge, Molly served her time and moved to another city. It was rumored that she lived in a communal apartment and worked as a janitor. 6 months later, David was adopted. It turned out that his father died long ago in prison, and the drunk mother did not care where her son was. She signed the waiver without looking for a bottle of alcohol. Kelly's delivery was, of course, delivered by Lisa. Things were tight. One of the babies rolled over in the womb and wouldn't come out. Kelly could no longer tolerate the infernal pain and moaned softly. James, pale as a sheet, he walked back and forth across the courtyard, asking for God's help. I wish Kelly and the kids would live. Maybe I should have taken her to the maternity hospital for nothing. Twins are a big deal, and only someone who doesn't know anything. David was playing in the sandbox and having fun making mud pies. He drove the sand on the toy truck. Suddenly, from the house came the shrieks of his wife. Then silence, and then a child's crying. James himself didn't realize how he swam and fainted right in the middle of the yard. A frightened David dropped everything and ran into the house shouting, Mama Baba, Daddy is down and not breathing. I'm scared. Lisa just fiddled with the little ones, splashing her hands and shouting that men are weak people, and the famous surgeon as a girl fainted. I run. David running. She grabbed a bucket of water and sprinted to dump it on James. The man grunted and came to in a flash, not understanding anything, and Granny, screaming, It's okay, Kelly and the kids are fine. Don't give me any more trouble. I don't have time for you right now. Take David and go to the store and take a walk. James changed his clothes and went to the store, bought the baby some goodies, and he picked his sweetheart a beautiful bouquet of wildflowers. He shouted to the whole street, Hooray! I have twins, a boy and a girl. David, you have a brother and sister now. When he got home, he quietly peeked into the house. Kelly was just taking turns feeding the babies. Seeing James in a businesslike manner, she said, Here, Daddy, get used to it. We'll fight together now. I can't handle 3 by myself. James, carefully, as if a crystal vase, took a small fresh roll. A pair of gray eyes and plump, tube-shaped lips looked up at him. He asked Kelly quietly, Am I holding a son or daughter? They look alike now. She laughed heartily. Remember, Daddy, it's Miranda. You're holding her, and I'm feeding my son. What should we call her? You decide. Kevin it is. Okay. David also cautiously reached out to the newborn, timidly touched the nose, and authoritatively declared Lyalia. Everyone laughed and began to thank Lisa. Luna was dozing in her rocking chair. Oh, you scared me, Kelly. I thought it would never work. I've never had such a hard labor before. Kevin went well. All right. Miranda, on the other hand, rocking her legs and wouldn't come out. Wouldn't go into the light. Barely turned her over with God's help. Kelly was tortured. Then she screamed. Then she cried. Then she fainted. Only Miranda pulled her out. David comes running, screaming Daddy's down. What a mess, this family. Soon the whole big friendly family moved into their new house. It was quiet and spacious. It smelled of wood and herbs. The little ones slept wonderfully on the veranda. David was allowed to take a huge, ship-like baby carriage around the village with his father. As soon as someone I knew tried to look in and cuddle the babies, David menacingly blocked their way. You can't. Miranda and Kevin are asleep. Will you wake them up? James opened his private practice little by little over a 6-month period. He was getting a lot of patients. It was barely making any money. What's a senior citizen gonna do? And James didn't open his office for the money. He opened it to heal people. And Kelly enjoyed being a mother. Grandma helped out with everything. Isn't it a joke, having 3 people at once? Kevin was calmer, but Miranda would literally go into every nook and cranny of the house. It was only necessary to turn away. The little ones often fought. David separated them, like an older brother. Still, when late at night the house was finally quiet, Kelly and James would look at those little sniffling baby noses. They always hugged and mumbled about how nice it was to have so many babies, lots of hugs, kissing little hands, and native cheeks. After all, that's basically what life is all about. More than once, Kelly has caught herself thinking that if it hadn't been for that scoundrel Jacob and his intrigues, she never would have met James and would have lived in lies with deceitful and hypocritical people side by side. So it is not for nothing that the saying is made up that God does not give everything for the best. After all, His designs are always better than ours.